Welcome back to my YouTube channel today. And here is the content of today's video. In the long arc of modern Japanese history, few events have reshaped Tokyo's strategic imagination as profoundly as the rare earth crisis of 2010. For decades, Japan had built one of the world's most sophisticated industrial economies, an engine powering robotics, electric motors, advanced batteries, and precision electronics. Beneath this technological success lay a quiet assumption that global supply chains would remain stable, rational, and insulated from geopolitics. Japan, pragmatic and globally integrated, trusted in efficiency. Then, in September 2010, that assumption collapsed. Following a maritime dispute near the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands, China abruptly halted rare earth shipments to Japan. Overnight, a supply chain that underpinned Japan's automotive, electronics, and defense industries was thrown into panic. Prices surged. Manufacturers scrambled for substitutes. Government officials confronted a chilling reality. Japan depended on China for nearly 90% of its rare earth imports materials essential to the functioning of a high-tech economy. This was not simply an economic disruption, it was a strategic awakening. China had not struck Japan with missiles or sanctions. It had done something more subtle and in many ways more powerful. Beijing demonstrated that control over critical resources could be leveraged as a geopolitical weapon capable of forcing even advanced economies into vulnerability. Japan learned the lesson instantly. Interdependence is not a guarantee of peace. It can be a mechanism of coercion. Rare earths themselves are not rare. They exist across continents: Australia, Vietnam, Canada, the United States. What China controlled was not the minerals, but the processing ecosystem, the refining, separation, and purification stages that make rare earths usable in advanced technologies. By mastering these industrial bottlenecks, Beijing built an almost unchallenged monopoly over the world's supply chain. For Japan, the implications were existential. Rare earths power the servo motors in Toyota hybrids, the magnets in Panasonic appliances, the precision tools in Sony imaging systems, and the guidance components in defense technologies. A prolonged cutoff would have crippled Japan's competitive edge. In that moment, Tokyo realized that the very core of its industrial miracle rested upon a single choke point outside its control. The shock of 2010, therefore, became something far larger, a turning point in Japan's national strategy. It revealed that the structures of globalization celebrated for their efficiency could become liabilities when geopolitical tensions flare. It forced Japan to rethink the foundations of resilience, sovereignty, and long-term technological security. More importantly, the crisis marked the moment when Japan began to understand China not just as a trading partner, but as a strategic rival capable of shaping Japan's economic destiny. The rare earth cutoff was a diplomatic message packaged as an export restriction, and Tokyo heard it clearly. From this moment forward, Japan embarked on one of the most ambitious diversification strategies of the century, a global campaign to escape China's rare earth monopoly and rebuild its supply chain autonomy from the ground up. This was not merely a policy shift. It was a transformation of national consciousness, an acknowledgement that in the 21st century, economic power is inseparable from geopolitical power, and that sovereignty is measured not only by borders, but by supply chains. The rare earth shock of 2010 did more than disrupt Japanese industry. It reshaped Tokyo's entire strategic worldview. Japan understood that vulnerability could no longer be outsourced and that resilience could no longer be assumed. If China had mastered the art of choke points, Japan would now master the art of diversification. The response was swift, coordinated, and profoundly intentional. Unlike many nations that oscillate between reaction and retreat, Japan approached the crisis like an engineer redesigning a fragile structure. Rather than confront China directly, Tokyo chose a quieter but far more enduring strategy to build a global rare earth ecosystem that bypassed Beijing entirely. The architect of this transformation was JOGMEC, the Japan Oil, Gas and Metals National Corporation, a state-backed entity designed to secure strategic resources for the nation. In the decade following the crisis, JOGMEC became one of the world's most influential investors in critical minerals, forging partnerships not through ideology but through necessity. Japan began by turning to Australia, recognizing that the continent possessed both the geological abundance and political stability needed to anchor a long-term alternative. Tokyo financed and partnered with Lynas, the only significant rare earth producer outside China with refining capability. Japan didn't just buy minerals, it invested in the entire chain from extraction to processing, enabling Lynas to become the world's second largest supplier. At the same time, Japan expanded its search across Asia. Vietnam, with vast untapped reserves, became a strategic partner. JOGMEC deployed technology, capital, and expertise to help Hanoi build infrastructure that met Japan's exacting standards. India joined the network as well, contributing reserves and aligning with Japan through a shared concern over China's growing dominance. Beyond Asia, Japan reached into Kazakhstan for its metallurgical capacity and into Canada for its political reliability. Each partnership served a specific function in a broader architecture: redundancy, diversification, and the elimination of single points of failure. This effort was not merely about finding mines. It was about reshaping the entire flow of rare earths, securing long-term supply contracts, developing new refining technology, funding processing plants outside China, and investing heavily in recycling innovations that would allow Japan to reclaim rare earths from discarded electronics. The results were transformative. What began as 90% dependency on China fell to 60%, then 58%, and today sits below 50%, a remarkable geopolitical reversal in just over a decade. Japan did not sever ties with China, but it neutralized Beijing's leverage. The brilliance of Japan's strategy lies not in confrontation, but in construction. Instead of engaging in a resource arms race, Japan quietly built a supply chain resilient enough to survive geopolitical shocks. Tokyo understood that the world's technological future, electric vehicles, renewable energy, advanced robotics, would be shaped not only by innovation, but by control over the minerals that make innovation possible. Japan's diversification became more than national policy. It became a global stabilizer. By enabling non-Chinese rare earth production, Tokyo indirectly supported the strategies of the US, EU, Korea, and India. What had begun as a defensive maneuver became a template for international resilience. In the face of China's dominance, Japan did not escalate, it engineered a way out. Japan's diversification strategy did not merely shift the source of its rare earth imports, it altered the structural physics of the global technological economy. In the years following China's export halt, Tokyo quietly began to assemble what can only be described as a parallel ecosystem, an alternative to China's near-total monopoly over the critical materials that power the 21st century. This transformation expanded outward in concentric circles. At the center was Japan's own industrial-based companies that produce high-efficiency motors, electric vehicle components, precision optics, and advanced battery systems. These industries depend on refined rare earths such as neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, and praseodymium. Japan understood that no matter how many mines it financed abroad, the true vulnerability lay in refining and separation capacity, the technological choke point where China exercised the most control. Thus, Japan invested heavily in domestic processing technology, the quiet, chemical-intensive, highly specialized work that few nations are capable of sustaining at scale. By supporting national research institutes and partnering with private firms, Japan gradually built its own refining expertise. This was not simply industrial policy, it was a reclaiming of strategic autonomy. Surrounding this core was Japan's innovation in rare earth recycling, a field where Tokyo emerged as a global leader. Engineers developed methods to extract rare earths from discarded motors, hard drives, and appliances, turning Japan's own technological waste into a strategic resource. Recycling did not replace mining, but it created a buffer, a way to soften supply shocks and reduce vulnerability to geopolitical manipulation. Beyond Japan's borders, the ecosystem expanded into a network of trusted international suppliers. Australia's Lynas became the backbone of this network, providing both ore and refined materials outside China's influence. Vietnam contributed raw supply. India added processing potential. Canada offered geological stability and political reliability. Even African partners entered the ecosystem through Japanese-funded exploration projects. Bit by bit, the monopoly fractured, not broken entirely, but weakened enough that China could no longer wield rare earths as a strategic weapon. The impact was global. As Japan stabilized its supply, other industrial powers, especially the United States and the European Union, began to study the Japan model. It offered something rare in geopolitics, a non-confrontational path to sovereignty, a way to reduce dependence without escalating tensions into open conflict. Indeed, the Japanese strategy strengthened global supply chains far beyond its borders. The U.S. defense sector gained access to non-Chinese rare earths. European EV manufacturers found alternative sources for permanent magnets. Southeast Asian partners entered new industrial corridors tied to Japanese investment. In this sense, Japan's diversification acted almost as a global public good, the creation of a more balanced, multi-nodal rare earth market that reduced systemic risk for the entire world economy. But Japan's achievement carries a deeper geopolitical significance. It quietly demonstrated that power in the 21st century does not belong only to those who dominate resources, but to those who rewrite the architecture of supply itself. Through persistence, diplomacy, and industrial mastery, Japan proved that even in a world shaped by superpower rivalry, a mid-sized nation can reshape the global system by building rather than confronting. Japan did not challenge China with force. Japan challenged China with structure. And structure once built, is far harder to break. More than a decade has passed since China's sudden rare earth embargo jolted Tokyo awake, yet its implications resonate even more powerfully today. Japan and China now stand at opposite ends of a widening geopolitical divide, one that stretches across maritime disputes, technological competition, military posturing, and the future of the Indo-Pacific order. In this charged atmosphere, Japan's diversification of rare earth supply is no longer a matter of industrial prudence. It has become a foundation of strategic freedom. Were Japan still dependent on China for 90% of its rare earths, its foreign policy today would be far more cautious, its security decisions far more constrained. Every diplomatic statement, every maritime patrol, every alliance commitment would be shadowed by the fear of economic retaliation. But diversification has changed the psychological landscape. By reducing dependence to below 50%, Tokyo has achieved something invaluable: insulation from coercion. This new autonomy comes at a critical moment. Sino-Japanese tensions have escalated around the Senkaku Islands, where Chinese maritime patrols have grown more frequent and more assertive. Military drills in the East China Sea now mimic real conflict scenarios. Japan, in turn, is undergoing the most significant defense expansion since World War II, doubling military spending and deepening defense cooperation with the United States, Australia, India, and even NATO. Against this backdrop, rare earths, once obscure materials known only to engineers, have become instruments of national strategy. China's dominance in the rare earth industry still gives it leverage over global supply chains, but not the same leverage over Japan. The 2010 weaponization of rare earths worked only once. Today, any attempt to restrict supply would harm China economically, while leaving Japan inconvenienced but not crippled. In effect, Tokyo has removed a key pressure point that Beijing could exploit in times of crisis. Japan's new supply chain autonomy also strengthens its strategic posture in the Indo-Pacific. It allows Tokyo to support semiconductor decoupling without fear of immediate retaliation, take a firmer stance on Taiwan, deepen military alignment with the U.S., and partners pursue economic security policies that counter China's influence. In geopolitical terms, rare earth independence becomes political independence, but the significance extends beyond Japan's bilateral rivalry with China. In a world increasingly shaped by technological competition, AI, EVs, clean energy, aerospace, rare earths are the foundation of the global industrial future. By pioneering a non-Chinese supply chain, Japan has provided the world with a strategic alternative at the exact moment global tensions require it. This matters for Europe, which seeks autonomy from both Russian energy and Chinese minerals. It matters for the United States, which views rare earth diversification as a pillar of national security. It matters for emerging economies hoping to enter high-tech supply chains without falling under Moscow's or Beijing's shadow. Yet the rare earth drama also reveals a deeper truth about the Japan-China rivalry. The contest is no longer about who has resources, but who controls the architecture of global production. China still dominates mining and refining, but Japan now shapes resilience. China controls the choke point, Japan neutralizes it. In this sense, the rare earth story becomes a metaphor for the 21st century struggle, a competition not of territory, but of systems. And in a world of increasingly fragile interdependence, Japan's quiet restructuring of its supply chain may prove to be one of the most consequential strategic acts of the century. Japan's escape from China's rare earth dominance is more than a story of resource diversification. It is a reflection of a deeper transformation taking place in the international system, a shift from an age of complacent globalization to an era defined by strategic autonomy. As the global order fragments, nations are rediscovering a truth long obscured by economic integration, that sovereignty in the 21st century is measured as much by supply chains as by borders. Japan's journey illustrates this with remarkable clarity. By reducing its dependence on Chinese rare earths from 90% to below 50%, Japan demonstrated that great power leverage is not immutable. It proved that a nation, even one without abundant natural resources, can rebuild resilience through a blend of diplomacy, technology, and long-term vision. More importantly, it showed that asymmetric vulnerabilities, once accepted as unavoidable, can be engineered away. This lesson has profound implications for a world caught in the cross-currents of technological rivalry and geopolitical tension. The global economy is transitioning toward electric vehicles, renewable energy, quantum computing, and advanced robotics, all of which rely on rare earths and critical minerals. As demand accelerates, so too does the race to secure supply. Japan's diversification strategy thus becomes a blueprint, not merely for itself, but for any nation seeking to reduce dependence on a dominant supplier. The rare earth system Japan helped reshape now underpins more than its own industries. It stabilizes Western semiconductor ambitions. It strengthens Europe's push for technological sovereignty. It gives Southeast Asian economies alternatives to Chinese-led arrangements. It enables the United States to anchor its defense and energy transition plans without exposing itself to politically motivated disruptions. In a world where economic coercion is becoming a normalized instrument of statecraft, Japan's achievement serves as a quiet warning and an encouraging model. It warns that vulnerabilities, whether in minerals, chips, or energy, can be exploited with devastating effect. But it also encourages by showing that vulnerabilities can be transformed into strengths with enough foresight and coordination. Today, as tensions between Japan and China sharpen from the East China Sea to the semiconductor supply chain, rare earth independence has acquired a deeper symbolic meaning. It is the foundation upon which Japan can act with confidence, assert its strategic vision, and contribute to regional stability without fear of economic collapse. Ultimately, the rare earth story is not about minerals. It is about agency, a nation reclaiming control over its future in a world where interdependence has become a double-edged sword. Japan has shown that resilience is not achieved by withdrawing from globalization, but by redesigning it. And in a century defined by rivalry, resource scarcity, and technological upheaval, that may be the most important lesson of all. In the new global order, strategic autonomy is no longer an option. It is survival.